so far removed from the idea of America and its minarchism written in the United States Constitution, where we have to bring her back to where she belongs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. I'm your host, Roderick Threets, and we are talking about getting ourselves, our country, back to where it belongs, where it's supposed to be, in the most minimalist state possible. Though our haters, and I say our because your haters are my haters and my haters are your haters too. We're all in the same boat, rowing the same boat to liberty. Our haters have decided to become anti-liberty activists. They've decided to become what their predecessors were: Bolsheviks, Nazis, fascists. They've decided to become their predecessors by changing and disguising themselves by changing language. Right? It's the same rigmarole. Just pick something. Right? What I will tell you is they're not winning. They might have this perception on the surface that they're winning because the media is putting it out there as if they are winning, but they're really, theoretically, we know in our hearts they're not winning, because at the end of the day, liberty will always prevail. Now, not so fortunate for other countries because people slipped into that, but being the youngest superpower in the world, regardless of how our education turned out, I can honestly sit here and probably say 75 to 80% of us still have common sense and can connect dots, and we're seeing what's happening. I will only say 3% of us is actually saying something about it, right? The rest of them are staying hidden in their homes, closing their doors, hoping no one comes to the door for them. But that's not how liberty operates, people. That's not how liberty works, right? What we're seeing in these streets today, right, is what they think the revolution was about: to defeat the tyrant king. But please don't be fooled. This is what they say. They're the real patriots, right? But they're not fighting a monarch, right? They're not fighting a monarch. They're not fighting a totalitarian system. They are fighting because they are not in control of the system. It's a big difference, right? These same people will tell you that President Trump went in and kidnapped Maduro, right, with the military. Oh, no new wars, no new wars. There was no war, man. Ain't no war, man. Ain't no who's the enemy combatant? Who's the enemy combatant? Can you point me to the enemy combatant? Because if there's one there, they're either deaf, blind, or dumb. Because they ain't shooting back, they ain't firing back, they ain't even talking shit in Venezuela right now. Here's what's funny though, right? In a minimal state, people, We don't we won't have to worry about that because the monopoly on force, okay, is only retaliatory, right, people? We talked about this, right? Those of you that are new here, welcome back to this particular series on Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy called The Shield of Liberty, right? And if you missed it over the last 3 episodes, we've built the blueprint for a minimal state military, right? We funded it without income tax, staffed it with citizen soldiers. But all of that work is for nothing if we don't fix the software of the state, meaning the foreign policy that tells you that the military where to go and who to shoot, right? So we got to fix that part, right? We got to fix the interface, the button pusher, right? So before we continue, if you haven't liked, subscribed, all that stuff, make sure you do it here. Check mark here on the Rumble. We're on the YouTube. We're on Kick. We're on Twitch. What else are we on? Patreon. Make sure you go over to the Patreon. And we're now streaming. We're now streaming on Instagram. We're streaming on Instagram under my personal account right now, Titan of Liberty _ We're streaming over there too. And I'm going to take this moment here to check and see how that streaming looks at the second. So don't mind me, because this is a new thing. It looks like it's working, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna mess with it. Looks like it's doing its thing, so we're gonna let it do its thing, and we're gonna do what we do. We're gonna let that go. But let's get back to it. So I know we got limited time, so we got to get it all in, right? And you know, you can always come back and listen to it here on Rumble or on audio channels when it's available. You can do that, but let's get it. Let's get after it, right? Let me paint the picture for you of this non-interventionalism, right? That I think we all can advocate for, right? For the last 80 years, okay, the United States has operated as the world's policeman, right? We have taken it upon ourselves to manage the borders of nations thousands of miles away, to topple dictators and to export democracy at the tip of a spear, right? We've been told this is the price of leadership. But by the heart and mind of a minarchist, there is a more sinister reality. You can't have a minimal state at home if you have a maximalist empire abroad, right? Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. The current, we're going to talk about the current military industrial complex, right? Because it's not just a collection of factories, right? It's a permanent lobby for conflict, right? It's the 3-headed hydra of defense contractors, career politicians, and the Pentagon bureaucrats, right? This complexity thrives on instability, right? It needs the world to be a dangerous place to justify its nearly $1.5 trillion annual price tag, right? If not more, because remember, military is discretionary spending, right? So that can go up and down as they see fit. right? See, today, what I'm going to present to y'all I think it'd be a very convincing case, right? Is I'm going to define the doctrine of non-interventionalism, right? I'm going to show you why minding your damn business is the only way to kill the military industrial complex and restore the shield to its true purpose, defending American soil, not American interest in a desert or a mountaintop 10,000 miles away. Now, the opponents of said type agenda, right, say this is a myth of isolationism, right? It's a myth. It can't never happen because we have to be involved, and that's where they get it wrong, right? But before I go further into that, right, we have to make sure we clear the air on the biggest smear in political history, right? We have to talk about the isolationism, as I was just talked about a second ago, right? Because whenever we talk about bringing the troops home and closing overseas bases, right, the military-industrial complex and their talking heads jump on a TV screen and say that we want to hide from the world. What about those people over there in that part of the world? Right? Let's be clear. Non-interventionism is not isolationism. Let me say it again for the people in the back that didn't catch me. Non-interventionism is not isolationism, right? Because I want you to mind you, we're talking about a minimalist state here, right? Because in that particular type of state, we want more interaction with the world, not less. We want the gears of trade, right? The ones you see in the logo, right? In this series logo that you see on your screen right now. We want those gears to turn freely, right? We talk about true free markets, right? That's what we need to get back to, a true free market, right? We want more commerce, we want more travel, we want more cultural exchange, right? Isolationism, right, is basically putting up walls and stopping trade, right? Non-interventionism is simply the refusal to use military force to solve political problems in other people's countries. Mind your business, right? Mind your business, right? MYB. The irony is that the world's policeman model actually makes us more isolated, right? Every time we intervene in a foreign civil war or topple a regime, we create blowback, don't we? We create a new generation of enemies who sees the shield of liberty as a sword of oppression, right? When we act as global policemen, we aren't spreading peace. We're acting as a giant lightning rod for every regional grievance on earth. Meanwhile, in a minimal state, right, it recognizes that the best way to stay safe is to stop kicking the hornet's nest and acting like a sovereign nation rather than a global hegemon. Now, now we get that out of the way. Let's talk about how this Hydra is being fed, right? And I'm talking about the military industrial complex, right? Now, if we sit back and we know, right, our current uh, policy on the military industrial complex, it comes through Eisenhower, right? Because even well, let me take that back. Eisenhower warned us about the military industrial complex, right? And if I remember correctly, it was back in 61, right? Back in 61 when he said the military industrial complex can get too big for itself, right? But we didn't listen, right? Now, the military industrial complex is its own self leaking ice cream cone, isn't it? Now, you're probably confused why I said that. So let me explain how it plays out, right? You have defense contractors like Lockheed, right? Raytheon, donating to the campaigns of politicians who sit on the Armed Services Committee. Those politicians then vote for massive spending bills that include weapon systems the Pentagon didn't even ask for. Then those weapons then need a mission, so we find a conflict abroad to justify the inventory. I want you to think about that a second. If it wasn't apparent, it should be now. And I made it very layman without laying out procurement and all that stuff. This is straightforward what they do, right? This particular cycle, this BS, buying a politician to up the budget, is an enemy of the minimal state. It creates a permanent dependency, amongst other things, right? Small towns across the country become dependent on the local tank factory or the nearby base, right? This isn't defense. This is a high-tech, violent public works program. I want you to look at it from that context, right? In a minarchist system, we break this cycle by cutting the world's policeman mission out, right? If we're maintaining 750 bases in 80 countries, we don't need $1 trillion in hardware, do we? We don't need what I'm going to decide to call in this case the lobbyist soldier. Because remember, right? The citizens are the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, and the Coast Guard. The citizens are, right? In our motto. If you missed that, go listen to the last episode, right? The citizens are the militia outright. And the government has to ask the militia, the people, to go do it. And if we say no, it's a no, right? But go back and listen to the previous episode. You'll get the lay down on this one, right? But again, we don't need the lobbyist soldier, right? When we move to a purely defensive posture, we force the defense industry to compete on efficiency and innovation for our safety rather than lobbying for their profits, right? We replace, watch this, watch the flip, right? Watch how I flip this. We would theoretically replace the military industrial complex with a defensive technological reserve, a DTR, right? And I have a piece I've written about what the defensive technological reserve would look like. And I'll probably post it sometime this evening so y'all can get a catch on that. But that's what I call it, a defensive technological reserve, right? We stop building weapons to sell to foreign dictators and start focusing exclusively on the high-tech moat that keeps our citizens safe. Right? Now, we're going to get into something that may be confusing to some, but as I explain it, hopefully it comes like. But this has to be included in this so people understand what I basically have said before, right? And it surrounds the entanglement trap and all these things. And if we can avoid this entanglement trap, then we can end nation building, right? Because keep in mind, one of the pillars of the military industrial complex is the permanent military alliance, right? Now, y'all, some of you are going to say, what, wait, what, huh? What? I want you to think about this a minute, right? The permanent military alliance we are in is NATO. NATO is that permanent military alliance, right? right? Because we are currently treaty bound to defend dozens of countries, many of which are wealthy enough to defend themselves, but choose to let the American taxpayer foot the bill. This is what Donald Trump has been going after in his first term, and is going after it in this term also. He wants these people to pay their first share that are rich enough to defend themselves. Right? It shouldn't be our tax dollars in the current system, should be our tax dollars defending the Danes, defending the Germans, defending the Italians, defending all these people that are part of NATO. No, not our problem. But that's how the military industrial complex makes its money and ups its weapons, right? Going back to what I said before, right? These defense contractors pay off the politicians on the Armed Services Committee, whether it be in the Senate or in the House, right? And then they vote to expand the budget for stuff that may not ever happen, right? Because remember, it's a budget, right? So you're projecting. These are projections, right? But they make it big enough so they can scoop this money away to the Lockheeds. Why do you think, again, you remember when Lloyd Austin was nominated for the Department of Defense under Joe Biden, right? They questioned him about his Raytheon connections. He had to relinquish all the Raytheon stock or any connections to Raytheon he had. That's just part of what I'm talking about, right? But anyway, I digress. We're not getting that. We're not here for that. We're here for this. Right. And again, remember, guys, if you haven't liked or subscribed or any of that good stuff, please go ahead and do that here on the Rumble and on Kick and on Twitch and all the Patreon, all that. Torture Liberty Media Foundation. You can find us anywhere, anytime. You just Google Torture Liberty Media Foundation. You can find all of our stuff. So go ahead and do that. Please, I greatly appreciate it. Share this with your peoples too. But put in a little share, click Facebook, Instagram, all that, share TikTok, all that. And those of you that do have TikTok, Torture Liberty Media does have a TikTok account now. So if you just happen to cruise by TikTok and find, boom, boom, it's there. Torture Liberty Media. All right. But anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about. Right? Now, remember, right? These alliances like NATO, right, are the entanglement traps I'm talking about, right? They take the power to go to war out of the hands of the American people and puts it in the hands of foreign leaders, right? Then, right, then there is the nation building trap. Because remember, over the last 30 years, we spent trillions of dollars to turn tribal societies into Western style democracies. This is the ultimate hubris of a maximalist state. You cannot gift liberty at gunpoint. Liberty must be grown from the soil of a culture. It cannot be imported in the belly of a C-130. See, from a minarchist perspective, right? Nation building is a total violation of the state's mandate. See, because if the legitimate role of the state is to protect our rights, by what authority does it spend our resources to manage the elections in a country on the other side of the globe? See, when we stop nation building, the shield of liberty becomes lighter, faster, and more effective. Because we recognize that the best way to spread liberty is by example. If we build the freest, most prosperous nation on earth, we don't need to invade anyone. They'll be lining up to trade with us. They'll be lining up to try to get in as citizens into this country if we build such a nation. Right? But the problem we have right now, outside of the military industrial complex, to build that type of country, is that you have idiots in our country fighting the shield of liberty. They want to toss it upside down on cars. They want to attack it. They want to attack the men and women that are holding the shield of liberty. We cannot get to that part where people want to come here until we quell that rebellion. Because people like them, those people that are attacking the shield of liberty, attacking our men and women that are holding the shield, this country will remain unsafe. This country will remain unsafe for any new people to come into this country as long as these people out here are tokenizing them and acting a fool against the laws of the land. Now, let's talk about, as we roll out here towards the end here, we have to talk about the alternative to being the world's policeman, right? Right? Let's call it the porcupine doctrine, why don't we? Right? You know how a porcupine acts. Porcupine is docile as hell, and it doesn't hurt anybody. It don't look for trouble. It stays by itself, don't it? Right? It minds its own business and it just grazes along in peace. But if a predator tries to pull up, what happens? Predator gets a mouthful of needles, don't it? That's what our national defense needs to look like. And it's armed. For a better term, it's called. I would call it armed neutrality, right? Because, and the reason I say that is because it's the most cost effective and morally sound defense strategy in existence. We maintain a military that is so technologically advanced, so prepared at home, and so well supported by a citizen militia that the cost of attacking us is suicidal, right? We have the shield and now we have the sword, but the sword stays in the scabbard unless our territory is violated. This strategy actually makes us safer than the current model because most of the threats we face, from terrorism to cyber warfare, are actions to our interventionist footprint, right? A minimal state is the hardest target in the world because it has no exposed nerves. We don't have bases that can be attacked by insurgents. We don't have embassies that can be seized in countries where we don't belong. We are a neutral fortress. Just think about that a second. As we close today, I want you to look at the world map in the back of the logo. I want you to look at that world map in the back of the logo. If you can't see it, pull it up later. If you need a copy, I'll send it to you. Right? But I want you to look at the world map in the back of in the back of the logo of the show here, right? That's on the screen, right? Notice how it's faded. Notice how the world map is faded, right? And the shield is sharp, right? I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose, right? Because the world will always have its conflicts, its dictators, and its tragedies, okay? But in a minimal state, it realizes that it cannot be the world's savior without becoming its own people's master. Let me say that again for the people in the back. A minimal state realizes that it cannot be the world's savior without becoming its own people's master. See, choosing non-interventionism isn't about being nice or weak. It's about being loyal to our own citizens. It's about ensuring the shield of liberty is never used as a tool, okay, for someone else's conquest or a contractor's profit margin. I thank you for joining me for this fourth episode of this eight-part series. In our next episode, we're going to get even more radical. I know everybody loves to be radical. Everybody loves a radical one, but we're going to get a little bit more radical. We're going to talk about the business of defense in an episode I've called The Privateers. I appreciate everybody stopping by this evening, doing the things, listening to what I got to say. Again, if you got questions, you know how to get a hold of me, either through Patreon or email or what have you. You know, you got the modes, the means and the method. Use it. And remember, love your neighbors, love your family, and love yourself. Until next time, y'all, peace and love.